Okay. So now we have Rush in the room. We can start. No, it just turned past. Okay. So welcome to the SIPBRANDY working group. This is our first session. We were just chartered a few weeks ago, and this is the note well. If you are not familiar with it, please go and read the document this note points to. So logistics, we need a minute taker. Any volunteer? We only need like high-level notes and decisions. Any volunteer for the notes? You can do it? Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks. If we have a JavaScript, okay, Jonathan, thank you very much. And you know, I uploaded all materials and agenda to the IETF site, so you can go there and check it, download it. So the agenda, we're gonna have two presentations. John is gonna be presenting the BCP draft, and Alan will be presenting the opportunistic security draft. Any agenda, Bash? No? Okay. So before we go to the presentation, we have an issue with the milestone to discuss. So I'm gonna present it now. If we can resolve it now, we do it. Otherwise, we can, you know, revisit it at the end of the meeting. So these are our milestones, which basically is like to submit the BCP draft, basically, and then the opportunistic security. So the things like the second deliverable, we mark it as BCP. And basically, the opportunistic security draft now, it does two things, which is basically offering secure audio-video profile instead of, yeah, Ben. Okay, instead of audio-video profile. And that's basically something that is protocol mechanism and probably should be standards track. And then it documents existing deployments. So you want to speak or?
I was just going to say that that's marked as a BCP in the milestones on OSRTP because the responsible area director had to pull a bunch of milestones out of his uncomfortable places at the very last minute.
Yeah.
So those are not written in stone. They're easy to change.
Yeah, that's a good point. So basically, yeah, we were during the charter process, we didn't really pay a lot of attention to this. So it's good that we discuss it now. And so then the question is, yeah, is it okay? So option one would be like, you know, the milestones are okay. Option two would be to move the whole draft to PS. And option three would be to split the draft into two parts, basically. One, which is a small draft defining the mechanism, which would be standards track. And the other would be the other part of the document, probably as informational. So I would like to get input on that.
John Peterson. Yeah, Ellen and I were just discussing this, and I almost think we probably need to talk more about the documents because of exactly what the technical issue is with this before I would take a hum on this question or whatever, or try to get the consensus on it. The issue again is that if we are going to have the behavior that we're recommending as a best practice, wherever that's going to live, incorporate the notion that when you do opportunistic encryption, you do this thing with AVP, SAVP, then that needs to live somewhere that is at least PS, so we can point to that behavior. Now, one option I didn't say in this that Ellen and I were just discussing, and I don't know if this makes it any easier, would be just moving that into the place where we're going to specify that normatively into my document, into the SIPBRANDY RTP sec document. But I think since Ellen and I were just having a kind of heated exchange about this before the working group even started, in some sense, I want to make sure people understand what that specific technical issue is before we talk more about it. So.
Yeah, and as I said, I wanted to introduce it now, but I'm completely okay discussing this at the end of the session. So, Richard.
Yeah, I'm happy to discuss this at the end as well. But I think I agree that the stuff about existing deployments is not really appropriate if we're going to have this in BCP. Definitely not appropriate if it's BCP. Even if it's PS, like it can muddy the waters as to what the case is. So I think splitting it somehow, like wherever the pieces land, I think splitting it out somehow seems like a good idea.
Yeah, Alan, you want to say something to that?
Yeah, Alan Johnson. My understanding when SIPBRANDY was chartered that we were having two documents, one about comprehensive security and the other about opportunistic security, right? They are two completely different approaches. And, you know, I think if we stick with that and if other people had the same expectation as I did on that, you know, that will work, and we can avoid things like number 3 there. I don't think number 1 makes sense at all. OSRTP could be PS, but if that changes what it says, then that's not acceptable, because opportunistic security is what it is. We have an RFC that defines what it is, that had wide consensus here in the IETF, and we're just publishing how to do that with SRTP. So I don't think we can decide this now, but we should try to by the end of the day today.
Okay. So somebody else wants to speak now as opposed to later when we will decide this, or?
And I was actually going to ask about or comment on the milestones, the previous slide.
Okay.
Yeah. This one I didn't get at all, because the opportunistic SRTP draft is really what I would hope is the least controversial and what is already deployed. So I don't see why that would take a year or more to do. And the other one is the one that actually is not currently deployed.
To be clear, I mean, the controversy is not about documenting it. It's whether, you know, it's documented for, you know, informational reasons, or is you know, normatively recommended, or it's, you know, how we document it. So
yeah, but that's not going to affect the timescale, hopefully. So I can't understand why the first one's in March and the next one's in November.
Oh, you mean the order? Okay, no, I mean, we can change that. That's not an issue.
I mean, November 17 is far too long for that draft.
Right. Okay, yeah. Sure.
And
sure. So, Robert, you want to say something before we? No.
Yeah, it's 2017 is what it means. Okay. Okay. So, Andy, one comment on that, which is, I think we understand BCP here in the particular context of PERPAS being a BCP. In other words, when we say it's the best current practice in PERPAS, we know it is aspirational, right? In a sense of there is a current practice that we think is best for us currently, and it is treating pervasive monitoring as a threat on the internet. And PERPAS was passed as a BCP with that form. That is a little bit different than documenting what the reality is on the ground. The reality on the ground is there's not much security, right? Like any kind of any of this stuff. And yes, I will utterly concede to Alan that like the implementations he's describing are, you know, doing that in places that other things are not, then providing some security in those contexts. But do understand BCP here in those terms, in the terms of there's a problem, and the best way we know how to address that problem right now is what we're documenting in this, not what the reality is on the ground.
Yeah. Okay, John, please. I can drive this for you, or does it work? Okay.
Welcome back to the pink box. Okay, we're going to talk about the recently renamed document, SIPBRANDY-2016-SIPBRANDY-20160721-1830. Next. So Gonzalo asked me to just go over again some of the material that I presented at the dispatch working group. Then I have some things to say about the new revision of this, just to make sure people who are joining us for the first time get a sense of what it is that we're trying to accomplish here. So we want to identify those best practices again in that specific PERPAS sense, something that will hopefully influence both implementation and/or policy. And one of the really interesting side effects of making something a BCP instead of a PS, potentially the most interesting side effect, is that it is something we can say outside of the IETF, represents the IETF's consensus for what you should do. And we had a small problem with network management a couple of years ago where there were some service providers who were blocking some traffic, and people came to the IETF and said, is this okay or not? Really the best thing we could do, and I had to testify before like an FCC en banc about this, was to hold up BCPs. Say this BCP says you shouldn't do it, and you shouldn't do it that way. So think about that document as something that we're going to try to influence implementation, but also influence policy with this as we talk externally about what all this means. Next slide. So it's a two-pronged strategy. And I think this is one of the points that Alan and I are feeling around right now. So let's be clear, we're talking about that. What I propose to do in this document is to very explicitly show two forking paths. I'm not just going to have like one document that says, here's a way to do comprehensive protection, and then everything else lives everywhere else. See, that's not the plan today. Alan, you're welcome to try to persuade us otherwise if you think that's inappropriate. The idea now is to have two strategies. And for the most part, my document merely says, defer to Alan's document for how to implement the second strategy. And it's only going to be, again, in these cases of what ends up being like mandatory to implement, like cipher suites and things like that, that I think we may have some friction that we need to work out here today. But the basic idea is we're going to try to reuse stuff that's in STIR. As we know, STIR is an attempt to do an RFC that was called RFC 4474 bis, again, in a slightly more tractable fashion. Some cooler and braver minds than myself interjected themselves into this discussion. I think we got to a really good place with the industry in this. I would call out Chris Wendt and the great work that he and I have done on Passport and so on to get that into a much more interesting shape. One of the things it really does better than 4474 bis is it focuses on binding identities to keys. That's really what it does. In a way, it did. 4474 bis had originally the 4474 had a much broader scope of protection. It turned out that was really just not compatible with the way that service providers were operating their networks. We think this has a much better chance of just getting that binding between identities and keys. And yeah, otherwise, we're saying that you should do what's in the opportunistic security draft. Because we say you should do a particular practice in this, and it's that one thing, that offer AVP rather than SAVP. That is a normative behavior that we are now allowing that was previously disallowed. In other words, we're saying SIP implementations can now do that, even though they were not previously allowed to do that. And this is kind of, I think, the linchpin of where Ellen and I are feeling around how to organize this and what goes where. So my proposal is I at least need to be able to point to something normatively. And because of the way IETF specifications are structured, a BCP needs to be able to point to something that is at least PS to say that. And that's why we have these slides that we were just showing you about how to organize the milestones. But Alan, please do.
Alan, please.
Alan Johnson. I disagree with the bullet that says that the only important thing is the AVP versus SAVP offer.
Oh, okay.
Right? That's not the only thing about opportunistic security. Opportunistic security is about relaxing authentication.
Yeah, but that's telling you not, again, I'm telling you to do some specific normative behavior that is allowed. This specific point, again, is something that we need a normative statement that says that implementations can do that. Merely relaxing, I mean, we relax identity already, right? I mean, you're telling us not to do something we already are allowed not to do is not something I need to normatively point to. That statement, that single thing, is the thing that's different enough that we need to be able to say implementations can now do it.
All right, I disagree with that.
Well, no, but so explain.
But you disagree that we shouldn't be able to point to a standard struct statement that is doing that, or you are saying that you think we should go beyond that?
No, I'm okay with perhaps with normatively pointing to the opportunistic security document. When we open it up and look at it and see what that entails, then it may change. But I disagree with the statement that the only thing you need from my draft is that you can offer AVP and still do keying. That is not the only thing in it.
Well, again, I'm not saying it's the only behavior in it, but it's the only normative behavior that we disallow now. Right?
I think relaxing authentication on your keying is a pretty major thing.
But what?
The version of it that we were using when we chartered?
Yes, absolutely. That's the basis of opportunistic security. You keep the confidentiality of opportunistic security with SRTP. It's my draft.
Colin, if you can use the mic.
Yes, my draft has always said that since 0.0. It says you relax the authentication. Otherwise, it's not opportunistic security.
Please explain that a little more. What do you mean by you relax the authentication? Like, what specifically are you saying your draft tells you to do? Not use digest? What was it telling you not to do?
It means doing things like not having an end-to-end authenticated signaling channel to compare the DTLS fingerprints, right? The DTLS SRTP documents says you must have an end-to-end authenticated signaling channel to compare the fingerprints.
We'll cycle that. Okay, if that's what you're talking about.
That's one example.
Okay, well, these are the examples we need to tease out. The set of things that you think are behaviors that were not in, that are currently disallowed, that are allowed by your document as normative statements. That's what we need to understand.
These are the things that define opportunistic security. And my document describes how to apply the principles of opportunistic security to SRTP.
Right. And let's also make sure the elephant in the room is in this, which is what the algorithms are, right? Because if we have a PS document that says
security is how you negotiate. It's not what you negotiate.
Okay. So
and I have a quote from the opportunistic security RFC that covers this that we can get to later.
Again, We are going to discuss it later.
Yes, we are.
Yes.
And we want to get through these things. I just want to make clear, though, that I think one of the elephants in the room is that if the OSRTP draft is PS, it still it says you can use SDESK, right? Which is something that my document is normatively disallowing. So, I mean, these are the things where I think we're going to get, and again, that documenting that there is a deployment where people are doing that is reasonable, provided it's informational. It's not what we're going to be putting forward as a standards track document here, at least in my proposal.
Yeah. John, please.
Yeah, John Mattsson. My understanding is that this is high-level scope point-to-point and not point-to-multipoint. I think that should probably be pointed out in the document.
So we do have some PERC-related text that's in the document. I'll get to that in a couple of slides.
Yeah, but I think is that the only solution for, or is that a specific point-to-multipoint?
So at this point, I think I'm still collecting requirements. Right now, again, I think I am hearing requirement people want to do point-to-multipoint for this, and PERC would be an example of how to do that. And if there's a best practice we can get consensus for, I would like to point to it in a document, yes.
Okay. Just to be clear, so you are okay keeping on discussing that, right? Point-to-multipoint.
I mean, I have another slide about that.
Okay, then we'll get later. Yeah, Colin, please.
Okay, I'll come back to point-to-multipoint. But I mean, I think as you know, where the really formation of this was trying to, we really move things forward WebRTC security, and we wanted to figure out how to do something else. So I think that we need a draft that talks about the AVP SAVP thing. I could care less if it's that draft or another one. We're all at individual drafts at this stage. And that I just want to make the point that what we're mirroring there is what's already done for WebRTC. We're just reflecting that same principle into SIP.
I got a slide about that too.
Reduction and things.
Thank you. Yeah, Eric.
Hey, Eric Piscola. So I don't want to have a semantic debate about opportunistic means or does not mean, but it seems to me that from a technical perspective, there are at least two properties which one might be interested in. One property is the property that Alan alluded to, namely that you don't necessarily authenticate the endpoints. And the other is the property that you discover whether or not the other party is capable of doing security, but potentially fall back to no security if they appear unable to. And so to give you an example of that, I think maybe it applies to HTTP. In HTTP, we talk about maybe connecting, attempting to connect with HTTPS and seeing if it works. And if it doesn't work, you go, oh, I guess it didn't work. And if it does work, but then maybe you check the certificate in any case. So I think that there's, that there are two properties I would be interested in, and I think they're distinguishable and separate. And as I don't want to debate whether they're called opportunistic or not, but I guess I'm certainly interested in providing the property, and it seems to me that under many conditions, in fact, you can provide the property that if you establish security, you have an authenticated channel, but it may be the case you completely fail to establish security. And it seems to me that that's precisely, in fact, what the RTP AVP thing is about, is being able to offer security, but not if there's I will accept it.
Yeah.
Okay, Jonathan
Lennox, and possibly Echo will respond to this.
Oh, okay.
Maybe. Extending that, I don't actually see a problem with having the opportunistic security draft, or whatever you want to call it, but also not interested in terminology, say must do SAVP, but the BCP say don't.
It's the other way around, I think.
Sorry, must do SDES, which is say SAVP, not DTLS SAVP.
Yeah, the question is there going to be a standards track document in the IETF that says you must do SDESK at this point? Which we haven't really gotten to that yet, right? But I think
I guess my point is that I don't have a problem with, or I think maybe you have to get the 2119 language right, but having one document say, encourage, just as, I want to I want to use security, but fall back to no security. I want to use good security, but I'll fall back to bad security if necessary.
Yep.
So
that is indeed what this.
Right.
So this is, I wouldn't say good to bad. I think this is good to.
Well, I'd say SDES is bad security.
Yes.
I'm willing to say that, but it's probably still better than no security. And I would rather fall back to that.
That's a discussion that we should be having.
Okay.
More on that.
Yeah, Eric.
I'm sorry. Yes, I just wanted to make one mention on that. I think Alan sort of alluded that the requirements are for DTLS SRTP to provide end-to-end signaling security, but mine reading the drafts, just checking, confirms that's not the case. We of course encourage you to do so, but SIPs is, I mean, it's like if you don't do something, it's kind of worthless. But SIPs is certainly within the scope of the draft.
Yep.
And of course, you know, with RTC, we of course should not provide end-to-end signaling security.
Yeah.
Something to keep in mind is like this is a 1 hour slot, so yeah.
Well, let's be honest.
that was exactly my point.
Let's be honest. This is, I think, what we need to resolve. So I am willing to spend time on this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let's try to go through this real quick.
But just to keep in mind. By the way, there were a lot of new people coming, so if you can pass the blue sheets again, that'd be great. Thank you. Yeah, please go ahead.
Sure. So I'm not going to go into too much of this tutorial information here. We are doing stuff with 4474. Basically, what STIR creates is an environment where there is a SIP entity called an authentication service that is responsible for signing SIP requests, that creates that binding between the identity and the keying material in the request. And that will be caught by a verification service, which will perform a comparable function. The way that STIR works, it says it can be implemented at endpoints or intermediaries. Typically today, and most of the use cases we see for STIR, people are signing it at intermediaries. So we are going to be doing something a little different here. Next. One of the many headaches of the way that STIR is designed that makes this an interesting problem is that STIR only signs SIP requests. You cannot sign SIP responses. And of course, the way we typically think of offer answer, where you send an offer in an invite and you get an answer in a 200 OK, therefore is not the way we would need to do it if we wanted to establish some kind of like bidirectional security association using STIR. Instead, we need to use something like LWell's 4916 connected identity, which allows you to send the SDP probably in an update request after an early provisional. But this creates a whole bunch of really interesting timing tweaks and questions about exactly when the key material becomes available. And as we'll see, this is exacerbated when we're considering one of the most interesting use cases, which is gatewaying to WebRTC and trying to get like end-to-end DTLS to work through that. I don't think we've really ever tried to figure out how that works before now. And as we're looking at that for the first time, we're uncovering all kinds of potentially interesting edges on that. Next slide. Right. The algorithms obviously are one of the major concerns that we have in this. In the initial version of the draft, I indicated that I thought it was appropriate for the BCP to indicate a mandatory to implement algorithm for this. And let's face it, I mean, of things that we have as standard algorithms here in the IETF, it seems pretty unlikely we would do anything other than DTLS SRTP for that. This would be a time, since what we have in the draft now, there's a must for DTLS SRTP and then a may for doing everything else, including ZRTP. Right, so we do disallow SDS explicitly.
So I have very strong feelings about disallowing SDS. If
positive or negative ones?
No, SDS is not really all that much more insecure than the other thing. It changes, you trust all the servers, right? In STIR, you trust all the identity servers. It changes the set of servers you have to trust, but there's a set of servers you still have to trust. So what I'm interested in is getting to... Fair enough. And what it's, yeah.
So the comment is integrity versus privacy. Right?
So I want us to get to one thing that's widely implemented, okay? And our problem of having multiple options in this has just been a disaster from the beginning. So I don't mind deprecating SDS as long as we're getting to one thing, just one thing, right? So one thing with some maze over here or something not working for me. Like, I'm not on board if it's going to be May for other stuff. It's like, do this. Why? Because it introduces constant complexity of we have to keep designing for all these different systems that we see over and over again, and no one really ends up building any of them. Some people build this, some people build that. We need to be able to say what the IETF recommends as a best practice is not a May. A best practice is it's either a best practice or not. May is not a best practice.
So again, we're going to say that we think the best practice is using DTLS SRTP, but just as I said, there's a kind of a two-pronged form of this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we would be doing the community in the world a disservice if there was, say, a significant implementation base of ZRTP, and we believe that it is securable with these techniques and that it's better than nothing. I have a hard time seeing us really disallowing, but this, please room up. You know, I have a hard time seeing us disallowing that.
So to be clear, Colin,
ZRTP.
you are saying that you would like to see must and must nots.
No, a must, and that's it.
And not mention anything else.
There's just one thing. If you want to say you must do DTLS and ZRTP, we could have a discussion about that. But I mean, we should say what you must do in this, and that should be our best current practice, and that's it.
And keep silent about anything else.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
And we're not protocol police. We're
Right. Eric.
I don't want to sit down calls. I have a clarifying question. I just want to understand the situation. We are now talking about the first draft, the BCP draft.
Yes.
And so your proposal, Colin, as I understand it, is to have this draft say detailed SRTP, you must do detailed SRTP and nothing else. It's going to have some reference to the or SRTP draft. What do you want the contents of the SRTP draft to say, and what do you want this to say about that draft? That's like, so everyone understand the total transitive closure case. As I understand
So
it, John.
what's the interaction of what we end up mandating in this with the OSRTP drafts? What he's asking.
So as I understand it, John tends to normally reference the OSRTP draft, right? And so you're transitively closing over that draft, whatever this draft happens to say. And so just trying to understand what the entire closure of the entire graph says about things.
So my understanding of the OSRP draft is it says, look, there's this AVP, SAVP hack that you can use for any one of our keying protocols.
Yeah.
And any product that wanted to, if you had a product that was only did Mikey, but you wanted to use this AVP, SAVP hack, you could say, hey, I implement that draft for Mikey. And it specifies it, and you're all nice and happy. Okay. And what I think that the BCP says is for whatever chosen keying protocol we have, which most likely DTLS SRTP, but for the protocol that's our best recommended practice, the way you do the opportunistic is the way specified in that other PS draft. And I don't see any problems with that, right?
I mean, largely this is what we do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, the questions are, if that document is PS and it says you can do SDESK, then you're fine with that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that document's just talking about how to do OSRTP in a variety of protocols the IETF has published in the past, right? It's not saying what our best practice is.
Okay.
I'm saying,
again,
yeah.
I previously heard resistance as a path. So if there's no resistance as a path, then we can do it. Yeah.
Right.
So to be clear, it says if you happen to be doing SDS, this is how you would do opportunistic security. Yeah, the other document.
So I'm thinking that the other document, which would be a PS strength document,
Right.
would say, if you're doing Mikey, you do it like this. If you're doing
Right.
DTLS, you do it like this. If you're doing ZRTP, you do it like this. If you're doing SDS, you do it like this.
Yeah, just checking that
Yeah.
everybody understands what you said. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So John, please go ahead.
No, I think. I mean, if people are cool with that, then I think Alan is this.
So Alan,
I mean, again,
where are you?
Enough that, because this is our important question for Deck.
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is like a question of what goes.
we
in what document
should
and so on.
spend time on that, Alan.
Yeah, but I mean, we can't decide until we get to my document.
Okay.
Now's not the right time to be deciding what goes in my document or not in my document. So.
Yeah, but the general approach.
That's going
we're
in
actually
some
talking what's going
document,
into my
and if it's not
document.
his document, I'm glad to
Right.
write it. Okay, we will find it. I'm saying let's find a document with the properties I just described.
Okay.
I mean, to be
I
clear,
think my
yeah.
document currently has that.
I agree.
I mean, Alan, the question I want you to answer is like the general approach of saying, if you happen to use this, is that acceptable or not?
So Sean Turner from Jabber says, I can get on board with Colin's approach.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Alan, please.
Yeah, what Colin described is what my document currently says.
Okay, yeah, thank you. John.
John Mattsson. Reading in current document, I understand that you must implement STIR but not use it, and you must implement SRTP, DTLS SRTP and use it. Is that? I don't think. I think it only says must implement. If maybe on the terminating side that you actually must act as an authentication server, on the origin side I can only find implement. Also, I think
These are very early specs here. I mean, again,
Yeah.
get at the spirit, not the letter of the law at this point. We're trying to sort out what we think the design space is still.
yeah, but I think that's which of these. There's several things that you must implement. Which of these?
So what it
will you
actually says, if I
use?
recall in the last section of my document now, is that you must implement the STIR client endpoint profile that is defined. And it is the intention, even if it does not articulate it properly today, that means you implement both the authentication service and verification service functions in the endpoint.
Yeah, but implement doesn't mean necessarily use.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
don't worry. We'll
Also-
take
So John, to be clear,
Yeah.
you are saying that it should also say that you must use it.
it seems logical. I also think the document should answer what do you do if the terminator side doesn't support DTLSS-RTP, and what do you do if you get an offer that doesn't have DTLSS-RTP, and so on. What's the best current practices in?
Don't worry. We'll get to that. Again, I'm trying to figure out if we've got like the right fundamental building blocks, and then we'll get out the thumb screws and actually lock down what the behavior is.
Yeah. Colin.
But really, the point that got me up was not to do with Alan's draft. It was to do with your draft.
I think you're right.
I want to see it recommend one thing at a must level.
Right. Fair enough. Okay, we can do that. I mean, what was clarifying in this exchange for me was, again, people seem to feel comfortable with having Alan's draft be PS and be normatively referenced for this purpose. And if we were going to do it that way, Alan, then really I will say very, very little about this, other than like, opportunistic security is what's in that document over there. And if you can't do this, do that. It's going to have that statement though, right? As long as you're okay with the BCP statement saying you should be doing the comprehensive protection if you got it. If you don't, do what's in Alan's draft. You're sold?
So, Colin.
Sold.
That's a yes or no?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was nodding. That's a yes. I'm sold.
Okay.
Yeah, right. But, the guys remotely cannot see you.
Okay.
Very sorry. I agree.
Okay. So
for the record, I tested.
Let the minutes and so on reflect. I mean, so that's what I would ask the chairs to pursue as a milestone.
So I didn't see actually what Alan was saying. I mean, Shani is remotely, so I'm not trying to be a pain in the neck or anything. We do have remote participants.
I agree with a lot of what's being said. We're not going to. We shouldn't decide it now until we talk about what's in my document.
Right.
Okay.
So please, let's not do consensus here. Let's talk.
I'm not calling for a ham. I'm just trying to get the sense of the room. Yeah. Thank you, Alan.
So so what I did for the 0-1, I think we're still collecting requirements. As we started talking about this, people came up with work and asked about what about multi-point, right? Well, should there be some story we have that is going to interface this with PERC or something? What should we do? What should we say about BWAs? Largely, we're talking about endpoint behavior in this. Is it worth having a reference in there to 7879 that talks about ways that BWAs might behave theoretically in some alternate universe where BWAs listen to IETF RFCs? So we have a couple of plugs in for things like that. There's a warning about SIPREC and about the fact that basically, if you send this media to an endpoint that can decrypt it, who knows what that endpoint will do with it? And there are limits to what we can practically achieve with confidentiality and SIP. We have a little bit better text about anonymity and the stir interaction in that. Do you have something on this, Colin?
It just seemed like it might be the right time to comment on PERC.
Okay. I think I do.
Oh, you have a slide for PERC?
So. Yeah. I mean, go ahead. No, I don't actually. So comment on PERC now. Okay. Sorry.
So it just seems to me that though solving a conferencing situation would be highly desirable, we're still very early on that stage. We don't know what we're doing yet, and I'd rather see this proceed with just making the stuff that we know well work and worry about the type of PERC situations a little bit farther down the road.
So you would be kind of you are saying that you would like to see point-to-point fix first, and then
let's get that first, and if it then turns out we know how to do non-point-to-point situations, maybe we take that on. But initially, I think we're going to have enough problems just getting the simple thing done.
Yeah, PERC has a lot of purpose-y language in its charter and so on as well. So I mean, I think we could view that as just an extension of this general mandate to get purpose to work well.
Eric.
So, yeah, I mean, I generally agree with Colin on this PERC point. I'm no one is more enthusiastic about PERC than me. Well, maybe someone is, but I'm pretty enthusiastic about it. I'm actually more concerned about the milestone case, and that I think it's reasonably likely PERC will not be finished by the time. So I'm happy if we can find some way to weave in the direction of PERC and how it's like an awesome thing we should be doing. I'm like totally happy to do that. But what I don't want to do is have it be March or whatever it is, and have it be like, well, PERC isn't done yet, and now we're like just stuck sitting behind it, right? That's the part I'm trying to avoid. So if there's some way to thread that needle, I'm perfectly happy with it. But I think my guess is PERC won't really be done for another year or so.
Okay.
Andy.
So Andy Hutton, I would just express a little bit more caution on that. I think actually there is some tight coupling between this and PERC, at least in that, as far as a SIP endpoint is concerned, it has to be able to initiate both without knowing prior knowledge of what the session is going to be, whether it's going to be a multi-party or point-to-point. So we shouldn't rush too far. Basically, PERC and this work has to at some point align.
So you are saying that if we fix the point-to-point case and then we start working on the multi-point case, we may think that we should have done things differently for the point-to-point case. That's what you're
that's
saying?
a possibility, I guess. They must be aligned in some way.
So do you think it's a likely possibility, or?
I mean, and
Yes.
in this instance, Andy, that responsibility would devolve to PERC, right? I think is what effectively that would mean.
As long as PERC accepts that as a responsibility, there's nothing in the charter or anything that says these must be aligned.
Okay.
That can be fixed.
Yes, it could be fixed.
Okay, thanks. Richard.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a bunch of time in BOFs this week, and I think we have a clear, well-scoped problem here with just covering point-to-point. Like, I think PERC is significantly different enough that it makes sense to handle it separately if we need to handle it separately. Like, if it logistically works to put it together, fine, we can put them together. But I don't think it's a big deal to treat them separately either. I think we can do this in PERC and, you know, take whatever solution we do there and anoint it as BCP later. And cover that case. And to the point about SIP endpoints, I think it's actually completely within the realm of the design space right now that there wouldn't be actually that much difference between what we would be proposing here and what you would do from the endpoint perspective to do PERC. So I think there may not actually be that much to do for PERC. Ultimately, it may just be, you know, go over and do this thing over here.
Okay. Yeah. John.
John Mattsson, also I'm supporter of concentrating on point-to-point. I think PERC might require more than just the double encryption to actually work. So if it fits, we can put that together.
Let the minister reflect.
Okay.
We will be ripping that out.
Okay.
But the other things on here seem reasonable. Again, anyway, flip forward, please.
So next, yeah.
Flip forward again.
Next.
Right, so we are starting to build what is effectively a profile, I think, for using STIR, where we assume that endpoints will be acting as both the authentication service and the verification service. The hard edge on that, of course, is getting the certs. And so we have some text about that now. I guess I am now starting to sketch out in my head what the ACME use case for this looks like, both for using an ACME test to acquire a cert for a telephone number and for greenfield SIP URIs. And that's probably not work that we're going to complete in the scope of this timeline either. So, yeah. Oh, we're not doing this work group. This will be done in ACME. Yeah. So, I mean, as a consequence, we're going to have to figure out from a specmanship perspective how we're going to approach that. Right now, I think we're just saying there's going to be a way that they're going to be able to get certs. One way we are going to describe, next slide, is basically using some kind of a self-signed cert to do it. And this is what I'm saying is like kind of the opportunistic approach to STIR, where you'll have a self-signed key that will at least give you trust on first use kind of properties. And that's the only benefit to this that goes beyond, just doing nothing at all.
So in this case, just I have in my head, there'd be a self-signed cert that would that I would then affiliate with the phone number that the thing apparently came in on.
Yeah, in that tofu way. And I think that's like slightly better. But I'm certainly open to people telling me that they don't think that's slightly better. I think it's slightly better.
No, I think tofu is Jonathan Lennox. I do not think tofu is Jonathan Lennox. Sorry. I think tofu is a reasonable property. Again, if you can't do anything better. But I assume would STIR be specifying this?
Yeah. It's a notion.
So is that in 4474 bits, or is that going to be a separate?
No. This is in. I'm sorry. This is in us. So I put in a bit in 4474 bits that says don't rule this out. In other words, 4474 bits is full of lots of language that say that, like, I'm not here to tell you who you trust, right? And so there's lots of language that says, like, it's really a matter of local policy whether you decide to accept a credential or not and its scope of authority. Okay. But
things like, what the certificate has to look like and is in scope of STIR, like what it needs to have in its identity and all that stuff. And
Mr. Turner, he helped us with that.
And that's all something that we can just lift straight here. We don't need anything new.
We'll refer to it, yeah.
And are there like specific, like, I don't know how many different modes these things have. I haven't followed STIR that closely. So.
Yeah, we would have to go through and specify what exactly means, but for the TN cert especially, that would be complex. But we'll do it. We'll do it. All right, next. Do you want to get down slides? One of the things that's come through that's clear to me this is that we are for the first time trying to figure out really how to align the end-to-end security model, potentially even gateway between WebRTC and SIP on this. And this is the first time I think we've really taken a hard look at that. That's why, Adam, wasn't it, raised, is that him here? Oh, yes, I see him. Consent, right, as a good example of something that we've never really had a place in SIP where we asked you to do ICE-style consent as we do in WebRTC. And it does seem to belong here. So getting the timing of consent and ICE and connected identity and the keying that comes in these different places in STP, potentially that would in WebRTC, that's an interaction we need to study and we make sure it's right. I've been having some conversations with MT about that to make sure that we get that locked down. We aren't seeing, I think, any showstoppers. I don't think there's a real problem, but I do want to make sure we really understand it and that we have a plausible story about how this will work with existing WebRTC implementations, or potentially if, there needs to be some kind of a delta.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think? I mean, given roughly what we're discussing here, is this, I don't know, given how the discussion has gone, if we want to talk about adoption of items yet, definitely we could use some more eyeballs. I've been glad to get a fair amount of eyeballs on the spec already, though not much list discussion. I want to make sure there's no requirements for missing, right? Things like the perk thing came up and we're now going to take that off the plate. That's cool. I suspect there could be other kind of edge cases or corner cases people are interested in. If so, let's surface them. Because once we think we've got the space we want to operate on here, we'll get out the thumb screws and we'll really say what that endpoint profile means, what the interaction with WebRTC looks like, and so on.
Yeah, so I have to admit, I haven't read the latest version of the draft, so I can't remember if it's in here, but you mentioned, so you've been mentioning sort of cipher suites, ciphers, whatever. But I mean, the relevant question, I think, inside of DTLS is what cipher suites you require in DTLS SRTP. So WebRTC already has some requirements. I assume we simply import those.
Yeah, good question. I was assuming you're just going to do, the typical ECDSA best practices for this that exists today, and
I think that's the appropriate thing.
P256 and
I think proper for secrecy with ECDSA and P256 and GCM is the appropriate thing. So as long as people are cool with that, I think that's we should do.
Jonathan, are we at the point where we're going to want to require TLS 1.3 rather than 1.2?
No, I don't think that's I mean, that's a decision we can make like in March. But I think the answer is probably no. But
Okay.
Okay. So I mean, so you're envisioning that in addition to the crypto stuff we've been discussing, things like the consent stuff, would it be in the same document, or would that be a separate document?
Yeah, we're going to end up pointing to a lot of music documents right now that are talking about how and again, those are in flight.
There's nothing that's talking anywhere about consent and SIP.
Yeah, so talking about consent. I've looked at some of the trickle things with info methods, and I really started to feel terribly nauseous when I looked at that. So I mean, I think we are going to have to take a hard look at the stuff that's in flight in music right now for ICE with SDP.
Okay.
And I think the question is, does consent belong in that stuff, right? Because there's a new ICE music ICE SDP document like right now, right, that Krista or somebody's doing, and it could either be there or it could be here.
So we have 20 minutes. I want Alan to present, and then we will take in the hams. So yeah, Ben.
This is Ben Campbell. One charter comment, and we may find this is a mistake, and charters can be changed. Right now, the charter says any standards work will be outsourced to whatever group would normally handle it.
Right.
So I imagine. I'm sorry. So yeah, I mean, probably it belongs in that music SDP ICE document to specify how consent would look in this. That does introduce some heart palpitations for me though when I take a look at the state of that work.
Yeah, thank you, Alan.
Okay, I'm going to talk about the opportunistic SRTP draft on behalf of Bernard, Andy, Laura, and Thomas. Next slide. Just a note about the motivation for this, some of which has been talked about. One thing is documenting existing practice, what used to be known as best effort SRTP. Another is, though, the needs of the SIP forum. Their SIP Connect, SIP trunking recommendation currently is all clear text, and we desperately would like to introduce SRTP encryption. And the only way to do that is to do it opportunistically. And of course, the third reason is that, now that we have as a community embraced OSRTP post-Snowden, it seems like it's a really good idea to define how to do it for SRTP to get media confidentiality as often as we possibly can. So just hold on that slide for 1 sec. So this is just reiterating the definition in RFC 7435, and our charter does reference RFC 7345 by name. So this is our definition of what opportunistic security is. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the approach has been we've talked about this already here. Basically, it's offering AVP, but upgrading essentially, doing secure if you possibly can, and never failing if you can't. That's the basic approach. And it's not specific to any keying method. And the draft right now talks about 3 of them: DTLS, SDP security descriptions, or SDES as it's informally called, and ZRTP. Now the current version of the draft is informational. So it just says, here they are, and it gives some examples. If we're changing it to proposed, then, we can do things a little differently. One possible thing is to actually just not even talk about keying approaches in this draft. Just be silent about them, and that way people that want to use whatever keying method they want can say that they're compliant with this OSRTP spec.
John Peterson. Alternatively, you could have exactly what you have there today and just not have normative statements in it, right?
There are no normative statements in the draft right now.
So, I mean, it's, if there's no normative statement that says this is how you do SDES, I think at least some of the heartburn that I understand exists somewhere in the universe about this.
All right. Well, this is how the draft has always been since 00.
I totally got it. And again, this comes down to is we're moving this to PS, and that seems to be a likely direction for this now. I think that would be a good way to do, because it's useful information. Here's how you do this, right? But to have that not be normative behavior, it might be the best way to.
So you're arguing for. You just keep it the way it is. Yeah.
Fine with the way it is, and fine. I can imagine how you write it perfectly well with what you propose not having them. I could see either of these paths working. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer to keep them in, because I hate drafts where it's all there's no examples and the like. So I would prefer to keep them in. The other point is about relaxing the authentication requirements. I tried to make that point with DTLS and failed, I think, due to terminology. I'll try another example. You're doing a DTLS SRTP handshake and you fail to get a fingerprint. Or for the fingerprint, all you've got is an MD5 hash to compare it with. Now, in a comprehensive security mode, you would fail the DTLS and you would fail the call. Okay? In opportunistic, that's basically authentication. You might let that pass because, hey, it's better than clear text.
I'm trying not to argue, and I don't mean to be arguing, but the example in MD5 was a fantastic example. The not get a fingerprint. I thought that getting the fingerprint was how you knew you're supposed to do DTLS. So I think that particular one I think wouldn't work unless I'm confused.
Or wrong fingerprint. It doesn't match.
I see. I want to. I don't want to argue about it, but I want to put a pin in it because I think that I'm wondering if that's actually if that's a better thing for the world than failing when sort of basic consistency checks seem to fail. The MD5 thing I think is right, but I worry that if you take the wrong fingerprint, it's like, well, something is basically busted on your end, and maybe you should go fix it rather than try to.
Sure. Yeah. Well, anyway, these are the sort of authentication issues with opportunistic security that it opens up, that are closed in a total confidentiality mode. Yeah.
Wolfgang Beck, I think this is necessary because of the user experience. If you call somebody who doesn't support any SRTP method and you simply hang up, you don't know what's wrong, and we get the call. So,
right.
And in this mode, you can signal to the user, okay, this is a connection, but it's not secure.
So the comment was about the difference between I cannot do high-level security versus I have detected an attacker and I'm going ahead anyway.
But for the user, it looks like I don't get connected and don't get any signaling what happened, and I don't know what to make of the call setup.
So I think this is fantastic. I think you're absolutely right. This is the only way to sort of deploy security in the current environment. I guess the philosophical question I think we ought to be asking ourselves, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is as I sort of alluded to earlier, there's like things which there's the guy didn't support what I wanted to do, and so that's fantastic. I fall back to clear text, and then there's I do the ZRTP handshake and it fails, right? And it's like that guy's kind of busted, and maybe I should just fail the call. And so I'm trying to figure out how we draw the line. Is there a big enough environment of people who claim to support the thing that you wanted to support, but they actually fail to, that it's worth trying to be compensated for those guys? Or if it's basically there's people who do and they don't, and then if you claim to and it doesn't work, then you're like, screw this. I'm just I'll show a call fire. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of don't want to be covering up for bugs and poor implementations and the like. But things where there's a middle box in the way that's breaking authentication, you don't want that to cause you to fall back to plain text.
Jonathan Lennox. So. I mean, I think that, particularly the ZRTP case, the ZRTP handshake fails. The guy thinks you're doing ZRTP if there was a ZRTP handshake. So trying to play back his audio as G711 is probably not a good idea. I guess you could send a reinvite without the ZRTP in hopes that because maybe you've got a middle box that's trying to transcode his.
No, see,
his
in the
crypto,
opportunistic mode, if your user interface does something different, when you have, say, secure SIP and secure media, if it displays a padlock.
Yeah, no, that I understand.
You don't do that with
Yeah, no, I
OSRTP,
understand. The question
even
is-
if it succeeds. So you
Yeah, no, I absolutely
never give
understand.
the expectation.
Yeah,
that
no,
it's
no, no.
secure.
My question is like, if it's clear the other guy is trying to do a security mechanism and something has gone wrong.
Oh, well, more like the SAS doesn't. You go through the ZRTP completes, you compare the SASs and they're no good.
Yeah, or like he sends you he sends you a ZRTP. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
and so
that'd
I
be
guess
bad.
I guess you could say you maybe should in that case do a reinvite with no crypto at all, but that's kind of
Well, that would be a case. No, that'd be a case for failing the ZRTP and going plain text.
yeah, but going to
If there
plain
was-
text means you have to reinvite because you can't
No,
just
no, that's the whole point of this.
No,
It's just-
because if he thinks he's sending crypto, you can't just play back his SRTP packets as though they weren't encrypted.
I see your point is at least one guy thinks it works, one guy thinks it didn't.
Yes.
That's an excellent point. That's why it says me phone call.
So Eric is saying, you want to repeat that on the mic or?
Yeah,
Because.
So I've sort of been thinking that you have consistency at both ends, but Jonathan makes a good point, which is there are cases where for any of these crypto handshake protocols where the last guy to speak thinks it worked but he screws up and so the other guy thinks it didn't work. And so I wonder at that point you basically have two choices, which is to try to recover or to fail a call, right?
Yeah.
So
if you fail at the absolute last step where you end up in a state where one side thinks it's good, the other side thinks it's bad, then they're going to be like, hello.
Yeah.
The humans will sort out. They'll be like screwed up call and they'll hang up.
well, you might notice that really fast, right?
Authentication would fail. So.
Any solution needs to fulfill another requirement, which is called setup time, which is something I don't think Stir can do, but I think this is a better way to do it.
So we don't have much time. I would like to get kind of agreement on the overall approach, and the details we can discuss them later. Right?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm not sure I have to.
Mosinati relates to both the overall approach and the details. So one thing that I've seen systems do differently than this is that precisely about Jonathan's point about mismatch between expectation of security. You offer AVP along with some keys, but then you answer SAVP if you're expecting to do security because the answer should have a good idea of both sides are going to be ready to do security. Whereas in your case, you're answering with AVP regardless of whether you're going to try it or not. It seems a little bit more ambiguous.
I've seen that. I don't recommend it. That has interop issues, and I don't think it buys you very much.
Oh, so I'm so sorry.
You stay AVP the whole time.
Yeah,
Offer AVP, answer AVP. That's what works through
right,
middle
so-
boxes.
So the reason that's unfortunate because RTC is currently requiring exactly the opposite approach. So maybe you could send some mail to the RTC web list saying that we're idiots because we actually require you to send the right thing, the nominally right thing. So if you send RTP AVPF, and we require you to send you to blah 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 UDP TLS blah blah blah.
Right.
So maybe you could send some mail to the list telling us we're morons.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see
So,
the other slides
next.
to see if
Okay.
there's anything else. This is just an example. Let's skip that. Another example. Changes. Yeah. Go back to
What? Okay.
So it has an applicability statement. Well, we can wordsmith it. Basically, it says do comprehensive unless you're trying to transition existing stuff. And it has a mention of CapNeg now, but it says doesn't help because we don't do it anyway. So I think that's
sorry.
That's it.
Okay. Yeah.
So because there are Mikey modes that it won't work. That's what we were told. I don't know enough about Mikey to say yes. There probably is. There are so many to choose from. Yes.
Okay.
So the only question is, right now the draft is written as if it's informational.
Right.
But I think we could just change it to PS, and I don't think we have to change anything.
Yeah.
In what's there.
So
which is good.
Yeah, I mean, I remind the third option would be to take any normative text out in a small PS and do informational. If that's to be honest,
need to do that.
I personally think that would be the clearest solution. And but I would be happy to
No, keep it all in one draft. It's an OSRTP draft.
You're saying you would think that would be the cleanest solution. Tell me which that it was, because I got lost.
So that would be
prefixes.
bullet 3 when I presented before. Taking the
Splitting it in
small,
half.
right, exactly, the small standard struct text that we have, moving it to a small draft and keeping this as informational. So that's what I personally thought it was the cleanest way, but I'm happy to go with whatever the working group decides. So
Yeah, I don't think we have any need to do that.
So
we
a
could
lot
do
of
that
the
if there was a problem.
I reread Alan's draft while we were sitting here. I don't think that the split, the split you described where you just take any normative text out is not the split that was proposed at the beginning of the front either. And I also don't think it'll work with the document. So if you skim it real fast, you'll see how that breaks. I thought I heard some consensus building towards just leaving the text in the document as is. It looks like things work with it. We can reference it, make it PS. If we're only making it PS so that we can have a normative reference to it without doing some sort of dance in the IETF, I don't care. I'd just as soon leave it informational and just call it out as a down ref when we send it up.
I don't have an opinion on that, so.
Right, Ben.
Ben Campbell. Again, reminding that the charter has comments to say about doing standards work here. Again, we can fix that, but we need to think about how we want to do that. Robert's solution is, well, it's kind of a workaround to the charter, but it seems to work around it.
What solution? To do it PS?
Do it
Yeah,
as informational.
Yeah, the down ref. Yeah, I mean, we talked about that before actually with John.
I believe the reason people were talking about making it PS is because it relaxes normative guidance in other PSs.
Exactly.
Yeah, John Peterson, if we're going to do that, let's do that in the PS document. Let's not do that in the down ref. We want things to be able to reference that generally if we're doing that.
So Ben, do you think would be a problem to recharter the group?
Well, the charter, I guess, is like the battle plan, right? It's the first casualty of the discussion.
Right.
Obviously, we screwed up the charter in some places, it looks like. So we can talk about that.
Okay. Yeah. Colin?
Given that the part of this that we're talking about is a change to the STP spec, maybe there should just be a little draft over in MMusic that does the part we need there.
So to be clear,
same people.
To be clear, that's what I was proposing. I heard some pushback. So probably we don't have like unanimity here. Yeah, it's.
I'm perfectly comfortable with this being PS and having and just fixing the charter thing that says we can't update our music. If for some reason that's like impossible, then I guess we can like take the 2 lines and put it somewhere else. But like that just seems kind of silly, frankly. So
right.
I propose you just make this PS and let the area directors direct as they are supposed to.
Yeah, Jonathan.
John Lennox. 2 things. First, I don't exactly know where this would fit in, but I said I would relay for Joe Hall, who had to leave early, said, "I have to leave early and like to preemptively hum no to SDS. Sorry, the goal here is to avoid PM, and I feel SDS is contrary to that." I don't know exactly how that fits into the subsequent discussion, but I said I'd relay it.
Okay.
The other point I'd make is I think what this is actually updating is not MMusic documents, but the various SRTP and DTLS SRTP documents, which I believe are AVT core.
Okay. Yeah. So last 2 comments. Last comment.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, to the MMusic thing, I mean, the problem is I suspect there are going to be a couple things we're going to have to go to MMusic for, right? And so if we're going to do consent and that like needs to go to MMusic, and it could turn out that what there actually needs to be is like a shadow overall MMusic. And this is what I just hadn't considered before, but thinking about doing consent, we could have like just a shadow draft in MMusic that does all the standards work. And maybe this is close to what we were envisioning at the time we chartered, right? You think it's not MMusic?
I think it's ICE and AVT core.
Oh God! Well, but no, it's like it is the MMusic ICE SDP draft. I think though that is where this stuff needs to. At least that's the only draft I know of where some of this stuff is today. So I mean, it's like if that belongs there, then the consent stuff belongs where that belongs. And so you could make an argument that what we need is some MMusic spec that shadows any standard track changes that we're making to SDP here.
Right. So. As I said, that was what I originally thought it was cleanest. I hear that, the best way is basically to continue working on this as a full draft, thinking that it will be PS. I will be talking to Ben. If that's possible, we'll do that. If not, we'll explore other options.
Good. Sounds
okay.
Good.
Sounds good. Perfect. So now, I mean, we are finishing the session. It seems that we have kind of a clear way forward. So the only thing we have to do now is to decide to take these 2 drafts as working group items. So I'm going to take hands on both drafts. So who is in favor of taking the Jones draft, the BCP draft as a working group item for our milestone? please hum. Anyone opposed? Anyone opposed? Okay, that's unanimous for the note taker. Okay, it was okay. Strong consensus. Yeah, that's what I did it twice. I didn't know if you just didn't stop in time or okay. And so it's a strong consensus.
There was at least one, Dan York, there's at least one hum in the chat room, although I would just say to people who are remote, if you're going to say hum yes or hum no or something.
I said hum in favor and opposed.
Timing for remote is horrible.
Oh, right, I understand.
It's the lag. People go and they just say hum, but then you have no clue what they're actually humming for.
I understand.
So in the chat room, just say hum yes, hum no, or hum opposed, whatever.
I understand. Yeah. Okay. No, I thought he was talking to me. Okay. So and the next one is taking Alanstrat for our second milestone. So everybody in favor, please hum now. Anyone opposed? Okay, perfect. So please, if you guys can submit both drafts as working group items of the group, I'll be happy to approve them as soon as I get them. So thank you. Yes, one last comment.
So we just hum to adopt Alan's document as the milestone for a milestone that we know we're changing. I just want to make sure that people get it. I mean, not just we're not adopting it, just that we know that we're going to be doing something. We still don't quite understand why.
The working assumption is that would be PS, right. But we'll be actually I will be working with Ben on that. Yes, yeah. Okay. Thanks everyone. The meeting is over. Oh, the blue sheets, please bring them here. I have one set, the other set. Okay. Thank you.